from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's Marty Ben here for part 2 of our conversation with Will and James O'Byrne. Very excited for you guys to jump into the second half of this conversation. We get a little drunker and get deeper and more philosophical into this stuff.
Really, a lot of the questions that I have about not just proof of work, but a lot of like Bitcoin things. And there is always an answer, and I would almost call it a canonical answer because I hear it from more people more than once, but they don't always feel like realistic answers to me. They feel like coming up with an idea in a frictionless environment, but interacting with a very frictionful environment, which involves, real people.
Well, that's literally my argument against proof of stake. I think human systems are more complicated than thermodynamic systems. And proof of stake is inherently a more social thing than having an ASIC chip that proves that you've done something.
But we can agree it goes beyond thermodynamics. It goes on, if the president decides to put tariffs and taxes on foreign imports, well, now all of my hardware gets more expensive. And now the decentralization fails because it's cheaper to run this hardware everywhere else in the world.
That's fleeting to an extent because it's only for... I would argue that's like that could be temporary.
Well, network security is not a temporary issue. If you open yourself up to a single 51% attack, as James puts it, you might as well go home.
Well, a 51% attack in terms of doing a reorg gets a lot harder as you go deeper in the chain. So.
I come from like a pure economics background. Like this shit is driven by economic incentives, and if a government were to instill tariffs on the hardware, another government, like you were saying to All Business Pete earlier, it was like would take advantage of that and say, all right, we're not going to instill these tariffs, all the mining come here, and then the government that instilled the tariffs is going to lose out, is going to get cut behind the competition, and they're eventually going to have to adjust their policy.
I agree, but we still live in a world where like you can't get citizenship even if you're, someone who will provide a lot of value to a country. Like to move over all of that mining infrastructure takes time and money, and it's money you might return a yield on later, but maybe it's like, Zimbabwe who decides to open that up, and like what else crazy stuff is the Zimbabwe government going to do other than allow for cheap mining? Maybe they'll impose some other restriction. Why would I, as a business owner, put that much risk, into something? I like those ideas. I like these, economic games, but I feel like a lot of the times when they move into the real world, you introduce so much friction. Some of it's just emotion, Maybe I've made my money, and when it gets difficult, I'm like, I'll sell my hardware. I'm out of the game.
So I really love being in a conversation where we can say, or I can say confidently that government effects are short run. That's like
exactly.
I love being able to say that with any degree of confidence, but I really think that government effects are short run. Let's say that they impose a tariff on mining hardware. Well, then, the Chinese company contracts with an American company to transmit plans for building this hardware at some licensing rate. I mean, I just think this stuff can be overcome. Where I really agree with you is that it's hard to anticipate reality, and there are totally going to be snags that we don't foresee, which is, I guess, why I believe in constraining the system to something that I perceive as being very predictable and very straightforward, which is a proof of work. Whereas, like, I don't want to rely on social dynamics or these strange emergent behaviors that could come about across stakers, because it's never been tried, and it's a human system, and human systems are like notoriously hard to reason about.
Yeah, but proof of work hadn't been tried either until it had been tried, and it's had its fair share of surprising effects.
Well, proof of work had been discussed for a long time. Hashcash goes a ways back. Proof of work systems had been built. I mean, obviously never as widely deployed as Bitcoin. But SHA-256 is a very well understood thing. The dynamics of staking across multiple participants are not.
Yeah, and this goes back to the heuristic fucking Marcus.
What?
That's my fake name. been saying heuristics.
Sorry for doxing you, Marcus.
Sorry for doxing myself. Here, I'm saying heuristics too much, but this is another thing I fall back on. So when I envision Bitcoin in my mind, it is a public utility, and no matter what happens around it, like, it is a pillar of light that anybody who wants to interact with it can plug in and transmit data. Like, go to the center of town and transmit data. It doesn't, like, Bitcoin doesn't give a fuck what wars are going on outside of it. It doesn't give a fuck, like, who is doing what, like, who is fighting with who. It's just there to embed data into. And like you were saying, like, proof of stake is inherently social, where you're depending on people who are, in my vision, fighting outside of that sort of beam of light and making decisions in that aspect. Like, I'm terribly describing my thoughts right now, but, like, again,
Folks,
like,
we're in the midst of a competitive sport right now. We're in Barstool Sports playing a sport, and that sport is called consuming alcohol while discussing cryptocurrency systems.
yes, and we've consumed a lot. We're 2 bottles deep almost. But again, the pillar of light that I see Bitcoin as not changing is imperative in my mind. Like, it is slow, dumb, and something you just anchor data into.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I would guess that Will is happy for that. And
Oh, yeah.
likes the fact that Bitcoin is fairly conservative and is kind of a holdout, and is this system that isn't taking risks.
I appreciate you for throwing me the escape hatch there, because at some point I did want to make it clear that I am not an Ethereum maximalist by any means. I'm not really a maximalist of anything. We live in a world where we speak, over 4,000 languages.
Quickly diminishing.
Quickly diminishing. Rip.
Well,
So many cultures.
Well, we can get into heuristics there, like the anti-Tower of Babel. Like, we're maybe consolidating from, we're coming back together after the Tower of Babel.
And Nassim Taleb would probably argue that consolidation imposes a lot of centralization risk, which, there's something to be said there.
I mean, there's that. There's also the idea that you lose certain utilities. Certain languages are geared towards certain types of discussions. One of my favorites is the anecdote about the language where they don't have relative directions, like left and right. They only speak in cardinal directions, and they have an uncanny sense of, what direction they're facing anytime. It's like a classic one.
It's like that scene in The Wire where...
What room are we in right now? And it's the north corner of the 4th floor of, whatever.
Right.
Like, having that understanding at any given time, there's utility to that. And that's reflected in so many things. It's reflected in our operating systems. We have 3 major ones and dozens of minor ones. We've got languages. We've got currencies. We've got, systems of measurement. People love to shit on the imperial system, but you know what? It has its uses sometimes for certain aspects of construction. Like, there are reasons that we choose certain things over other things, and I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin. I hold Bitcoin. I like Bitcoin. It makes me happy when the price goes up, because to me it has a huge amount of use, and one of those uses, which you guys love, is the second layer staking thing. I love the idea of these services building on top of it and committing their hashes to the blockchain. Like, that's a huge thing for me. I love that. But I am not unwilling to deny, and I'm a huge fan of, the other use cases of decentralized, computing, just in general. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm just a features man. Like I said, I live on kind of I live on the second layer, basically. I don't think I'm ever going to touch any of these protocols. And so what I love is being able to use these things. And Bitcoin has kind of, I think, made a place for itself to be not the use case for many things. And that's fine to say we're not going to solve that problem for you. And I love having this, like, workhorse that doesn't try to do everything. But it's not okay to say, and your problem isn't important, or your problem doesn't need to be solved today, because, somebody wants a prediction market and they want it today. Somebody wants a gambling application that pays dividends to its holders. People have made it clear that there's a demand for these things, and I applaud anyone who can offer it, even if it's not the optimal implementation, but if it's an implementation that makes enough people happy that they're willing to throw money at it.
And I think there's a lot of wisdom there. I think that oh, go ahead, Martin.
No, I was gonna say I fucking love that explanation.
Yeah, no, he's dead on, and he's touching on. I mean, so my brother really sold himself short in his introduction. He is far and away one of the smartest people I know, and I'm privileged to have been his brother for 24 years. But he's touching on a really age-old piece of engineering wisdom, which is don't fucking over-engineer. You know, everybody knows the guy. Everybody has the coworker who wants to rewrite this subsystem in Haskell just because it's cool and it'll quote-unquote scale well, when it doesn't actually matter. And so I think there's real value to being agnostic about what really makes a difference and where you should really put engineering effort in. I just think, I guess, when it comes to money, and I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm fine with certain aspects of Ethereum being a thing. What I worry is that money is really important and people's value is really important. And in systems with network-like dynamics, you have this slippery slope where people might start to build on top of a system because it's readily accessible and has a nice interface and good marketing and whatever else. And then all of a sudden you start building on top of this system that has these inherent problems at the foundation and ends up being repurposed for a use that it was never designed with the intent for, which is another classic, engineering circumstance that comes up. But I do really respect this idea that, like, hey, we just need to get something out there. But I think that changes a little bit for me when it comes to money.
I think I understand that. I mean, and in a certain way, that is why I respect a lot the transition in branding from Bitcoin to being a currency to a store of value, is because it's a shit currency. I'm gonna go out there and say it.
It is.
It costs a lot of money to move around, and it takes a lot of time. And so I think rather than try to stick to the mission statement, which was, give this method of exchange to the masses, they didn't pivot the code to match the mission statement. They pivoted the statement of what Bitcoin is. I mean, I say they. It's nobody owns this thing, but people as a whole. And I think that it is good to see that kind of level of principle, not to, what am I going to give my investors, but what am I going to do to make the best thing? I think that was the right move. But the need for currency exists, and a lot of someone's are trying to fulfill that right now. And that's really, we started the show with tribalism. That's what irks me the most about tribalism, is when you're shooting down a use case that someone actually has. I think that's where it doesn't belong.
No, and I love that you said that. And that's one of the things that I've been harping on a lot, is that Bitcoin's going to change us more than we change it. Like, I was fucking in 2013, 2014. I was like, yeah, anonymous. Like, I was fucking one of those idiots, like anonymous cryptocurrency, feeless. It was like Roger Ver's spiel. He was like, you can do like a feeless fucking digital cash that's peer-to-peer. But again, like, time goes on, more people join the network, and you realize, like, maybe this isn't what it is at this point in time. And that is one thing I respect, is that, like, we are sort of wielding to this thing. And again, going back to the pillar of light that we all just utilize, like, we're sort of adapting to this as it evolves itself. And it's fucking heavy, and it's fucking beautiful to be a part of it. It's like, it really is exciting. Like, I feel invigorated every day. I wake up and get to write about it. And as much as I hate on Ethereum, like, it's fucking exciting. You guys are taking on, like, we are. We're all humans. We're all taking on these problems, like, and it, like, right on the tip, and trying to push the boundaries, which I would argue has not happened for a while in this country in particular, and maybe around the world in particular as well.
I did it. I got Marty to be positive. I could leave this show and die happy, especially about Ethereum, but just in general.
No, but maybe we need less hate. less hate, less taste. No, I actually do not believe that. I believe we need to be as.
I lost it. I lost it.
I do not believe that. We need to be as confrontational as possible so we get the best results.
No, I mean, I love pessimism. I think one of the biggest problems that I run into working on a platform one of the biggest mistakes we ever made was letting people enter their private key on a website. It's like the worst thing ever. Never
Speaking
do it.
from the my crypto perspective, right?
Yeah, my crypto perspective. Never, even if it's my website, don't do it. Don't enter your private key anywhere. Never utter it aloud.
Never type it. Like,
Yeah.
never type it.
Don't put it in your clipboard. Anyway,
Don't
my
take
point,
a picture of it. Don't do anything.
Right. Yeah, even a picture, text analysis.
If you're going to
Huge
do a
thing.
picture, make sure it's a Polaroid from like 2 decades ago.
That's actually not a bad idea as a backup mechanism. Anyway, all I mean to say is that pessimism or skepticism. I'm not going to say pessimism. I love optimism. Pro-optimism. Kind of self-fulfilling. But skepticism is very healthy. And I think it's something, it's a challenge trying to work in this industry to convince people that you're not a terrible human being. But I love that that's people's first impression. Anytime that I propose something out there into the ether, I always get people, immediately saying, well, what are you trying to do? What's your angle here? And in a way, for better or for worse, that's one of those effects. You say Bitcoin's going to change us more than we're going to change it. It has made us skeptical, but I think that's healthy.
No, I do as well. And that's the way you get the best results. Like, you can't just be like, oh my God, yeah, this is going to work. You got to question everything at its core and really get to the bottom of it. And I am very skeptical. I'm personally very skeptical.
And that's why I'm here on the show. I mean, I like that you are skeptical, but you invited me on here because you said, we need somebody who's opposing me. I can't wait to get a hold of or listen to the episode that you eventually record with, who was it last week that you were saying just thinks Bitcoin's like this huge scam that's...
Adam Singer from Google. We don't have anything scheduled in the books yet, but he has... via DM said he will come on when he's in New York next. So whenever he's in New York next, and he's very skeptical. Like he believes that like our monetary system's fine. It's going to go on as it has for decades and be fine. Like our economy is going to grow at a pace that allows us to keep our monetary ambitions on the trajectory that they are right now. I don't agree with him, but I would love to hear his perspective in person.
Yeah, I want to hear that viewpoint too, because I think, above the skepticism is, and, this is, I think, probably more a byproduct of the mediums of exchange that we have with Facebook and Twitter. But, we don't hear enough dissenting opinions on the things that we hold dear, and I think that's a huge anti-tribalist move you can do, is talk to your friend who doesn't like what you're doing and talk really deeply with them about it and draw out of them why they don't believe in it. So looking forward to that episode.
Are we talking about Vitalik? Is it?
Hey, Vitalik, if you want to come on.
Sorry, I was
come
in
on
the bathroom,
whenever.
guys.
We're talking about a no coiner.
Oh, a no coiner.
Yeah.
The no coiner.
I didn't realize that was a
thing.
branding
It's a thing now.
that you could have until recently.
It happened recently, I think, in the last 6 months. But Will, we tried to dig into it earlier. You deflected a little bit, but I want to talk about you. Fascinate me because you dropped out of high school, and when we first met up at Skinny Dennis, we talked a lot about you were fucking smart enough to drop out of high school and work with technology, and you worked with gaming, correct?
He was making these incredible video games with no instruction or prompting. It was it was remarkable to watch. I had to go to college to teach myself how to program, but Will just basically sat in his room and via osmosis, I guess, accumulated the ability to just make these magical programs.
Geez.
So how'd you get interested in this?
If I wasn't deflecting before, I'm going to be deflecting now. Yeah. So I think like so many people of my generation, I don't mean to distance myself from you guys.
I'm only 16 months older than you.
I know, but it's a long. The Berlin Wall fell down. You know,
it has been down longer than it was up. That's what you're trying to.
and the pyramids and Cleopatra, whatever. Yeah, I got into programming via video games. Shout outs to the Ludum Dare 48-hour game challenge. That was a community that kind of raised me as a programmer. Those people were awesome. Like most game programmers, I read a couple of articles, learned it's a shit industry that pays you nothing and squeezes you like a lemon until, you're just dry of inspiration in life. And kind of pivoted into web development. Stuck around there for a while. But one of the things you were asking what attracted me to Ethereum, one of the things that attracts me to it is kind of its focus on the technology that we use today. So I'm a big fan of cryptocurrencies going to change us more than we change it, but I'm also a bigger fan of bridging today to what we're going to be doing tomorrow. And I think, one of the things that enthused me about Ethereum is its sort of JavaScript friendliness, and the fact that there is kind of this proposal to bring the blockchain into your browser. And so if you use any Web3 provider, it's called Web3. The idea is that you basically have your account and the ability to sign and broadcast transactions exposed through your browser in a reasonably secure way. So don't worry, you're not just going to visit a website and they're going to broadcast your transactions for you.
But I guess to play devil's advocate here, isn't making it quote unquote easy to program Ethereum what gets us into situations like the DAO or it's parity, right? The multi-sig contract that froze. Some people kind of tongue-in-cheek joke that if you can't contribute to Bitcoin Core because you don't care to or can't learn C++, then good, because that's a good filter on who should be writing code.
Well,
that
James,
handles money.
You're a self-proclaimed libertarian. I think you of all people could respect that people are at responsibility for the way in which they use their money, and you can promote best practices. But at a certain point, if I go out and develop a smart contract and I claim that it can do something ludicrous, and I'm not saying that's what other people have done, but if I say that and people send money to it,
you don't even have to claim that it does something ludicrous. Look at the parity contract. This does multi-sig, and because of a cultural element in that system, people just reuse that contract. Technically everybody can go out and audit the contract and figure out that, there's this bug. But because the programming interface is so high level and friendly and abstract, it engenders this, this lack of scrutiny maybe, or this lack of understanding, which I have a real problem with.
I mean, I don't know how to argue with that.
I would agree with James.
All right, we got Marty on the record. I would disagree with that because that's just classic elitism, right? Oh, that there are those who should be empowered to do and those who should be empowered to not do.
The reason I disagree with that is that anybody can go out and learn C++ if they really want to. Anybody can go out and write Bitcoin script. I think what's a closer analog is functional programming. What I love about Bitcoin script is that it's a language that almost nobody wants to work in, and it deals exclusively with value transfer. And so because of that, the things that happen in Bitcoin script are very tightly scoped to value transfer. So you know that anything happening in Bitcoin script is important. You should pay close attention. It's nearly inscrutable, so you have to sit there and draw it out. Whereas if you have a general purpose programming language like Solidity, then you can do all kinds of stuff, and there's a lot of flowery stuff. There's some filler in there, and maybe, the value transfer happens on line 87, when you finally get down there. So I don't think it's elitist at all. I mean, I think it's a very open system anyone can participate in.
We're at Barstool Sports here. I'm going to analogize it to, the NFL or, the NBA. Is that...
Yeah, I think that's fine. Anybody can get into really in the NBA or in the NFL. This is someone who doesn't follow sports very much, but I imagine anybody can get in with a sufficient amount of talent. Teams are probably chomping at the bit to sign someone who's 2 times better than, or performs some margin better than the average player. But No, I mean, I think this is another place where these systems defy conventional engineering wisdom, in that, like, you want this code to be very tightly scoped and very unfriendly because, well, I mean, not unnecessarily unfriendly, but like you don't want a general purpose programming language.
No, you want it to be unfriendly because this, again, going back to like it's securing money and value. Money is one of the most important things in the world because it's one half of every transaction between humans or between commerce in commerce.
Right.
I'm so sorry, guys. I'm gonna fucking explode if I don't go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
I really
no,
want
I
to
just
respond. To
I
this
had a
because-
similar episode, so. I just,
All right, we're gonna shit on Will as he's in the bathroom. No, I'm kidding. No, but like that is one thing I truly believe is like this is money. It's not something you fuck with.
It really is. It's a special circumstance. It's not your run of the mill program. I mean, I've written a lot of programs where it's like, okay, this thing, could shit the bed in various ways, and I'd be in trouble. We might be set back by a few days. And then there are programs that I've written where it's like, this absolutely cannot screw up, and this has to behave predictably. And what I love about working on Bitcoin is that the entire thing is that way. So, like, every single change that I submit to Bitcoin or every single PR that I review requires, like, the utmost of my scrutiny because you just can't screw it up. And this is unlike a lot of systems out there these days.
Yeah, that's like where I fall back on the argument that like this is fucking different than anything we've ever encountered. Like, excuse me, people trying to apply like guidelines and laws of your typical software like just doesn't. It's just like doesn't. It's not comparable. It really isn't. Like,
Yeah, it's I think like Elaine Au.
shout out Elaine.
Yeah, shout out Elaine. Her and Zabo.
Very underrated fucking personality.
Oh,
in this space.
totally. She is amazing, and so I think maybe the talk that got me most hyped at Scaling Bitcoin in Stanford this year was her and Sabo talking about this protocol that they are developing to transmit Bitcoin blocks and transactions. I guess the Bitcoin protocol over shortwave radio, and like you talk about
That's like ultra cypherpunk right now.
Yes, and that stuff just gets me so jacked up because that's exactly what you need to be completely fault tolerant. Like that kind of really diversifying away from reliance on the TCP/IP protocol. TCP/IP protocol is exactly the kind of thing that we need. So Marty has left the studio temporarily to go take care of some business.
I overheard as I left, you guys were going to shit talk me, so I think now's the time to shit talk Marty.
Yeah. Somehow we actually procrastinated shit talking you.
Oh,
yes. We can definitely shit talk Marty.
Right on. Yeah, let's get down to it. Man, this office is intense. So we're in Barstool Sports, as I'm sure everyone knows at this point, and it lives up to the name. I'm impressed. There is like an absurd amount of sports paraphernalia here. There's a literal bar in the office. Did you notice that?
Well, I mean that's not totally that's like bars have. I haven't seen the bar. Maybe it's a significant bar.
Oh, it was behind where they were doing the streaming. They were live streaming pro football players playing Madden, which is like maybe a Black Mirror episode in waiting, but yeah, it was behind them. I mean,
Okay.
it's cool, but
I was so busy running for the bathroom because I didn't want to miss a single minute of this riveting conversation.
I was lucky I got to catch somebody to ask because there's like 40 doors.
Oh yeah. I definitely had
Perimeter in
a
the
few
office.
false starts there.
people in this office
Yeah,
Burning the midnight oil.
well, we got half
the
a bottle of
Bitcoin
wine to
beef
finish,
cakes.
so let's keep going.
I know.
Right,
I have
right.
2 beers,
Right.
2.5 beers. So,
I'm definitely gonna cut this up into 2 episodes. So
Okay, that's great.
jeez. Okay,
That's
and I hope you
wow.
cut out a lot more. 'Cause, man. Whew.
No,
I don't know. I think it's been. I like it. I like when it's raw. You know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's-
I agree.
it's wrong.
So the reason that I love podcasts over like audiobooks is that I feel like when people are reading the audiobook, it feels too polished, and like when you're listening to a podcast, like a discussion, it feels like you're talking to somebody.
Unless, have you ever heard Ice-T reading Dungeons and Dragons book?
No, I
No,
have
but that's
not.
all I want to hear now.
He had a contract, and they made him read Dungeons and Dragons audiobooks. I'll have to scrape up which ones, but it's special.
I can only imagine what that was
man.
like. So where we leave off? Were we still talking about Elaine and?
We left
Oh,
off
yeah.
at the elitism of presuming that your code base should be difficult to get into because it's
See-
super important.
Well, it is super important. Like money is important. Like I don't like I would argue yes. There's places for elitism, like or not places for elitism, but like there are things where elitism can be applied. And you can say fuck you, you're being an elitist. But when it comes to money, above all, like the security and the integrity of that money is bar none. Like it is the most. It's the pinnacle, the penultimate goal for everybody.
I totally agree. And if you were to submit a pull request to Geth or something, of equal importance, and you weren't a serious person and you didn't write serious code, you would be rejected, just as you would expect from Bitcoin Core. I think, probably the thing that has happened, and I think it's healthy, is people have grown this skepticism that I said that I like. After a while, and I'm affected by this too, you hold a certain amount of cryptocurrency and you've sent it around for a while, you stop thinking of it as money.
It does kind of feel like video game bucks.
It starts feeling like video game bucks.
So for reference,
It hasn't for me yet. I fucking sweat every time I fucking.
Oh yeah,
move shit.
yeah. No.
As you should.
But So for reference, listeners, Will refers to any kind of cryptocurrency as space bucks to people who otherwise might not know what he's talking about.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got to start expectations low, deliver high. So
I like
I shit talk this stuff to everybody
Space
until
bucks.
I really get into it. But I think what has happened is not some people wrote bad code and we should stop people from writing bad code, because let me tell you, people are going to write bad code forever. What has happened is that people were too willing to trust services with their information because they did not, or not their information, but just anything, because they had not yet learned to be skeptical. And this happened in the early internet. You had websites who were storing passwords in plain text in databases that were easily hacked. I think you see it now a little bit. People are willing to give over KYC information to anybody who calls themselves an exchange. And that's your social security number and your photo ID and all that stuff.
Like that's not already all out there thanks to Equifax and
Yeah.
everybody else.
Negative shout-outs to Equifax. Is there a thing like it? Curses?
We just put a curse on Equifax.
Yeah.
I hope you guys die. I've actually got like an interesting like Fight Club theory about Equifax, but we'll get into that.
Oh man, I can't wait to find out
is
who
this-
Tyler Durden really is.
I mean, is this like you guys would know more than I? Would it be possible to quasi DDoS like the IRS with all the information that was attained from the Equifax Act?
Oh, just file a bunch of false
Exactly.
tax returns? Man, I don't know if you could. I haven't thought about that hard enough. But if you could, I hope someone out there does
Right?
and just lets this motherfucker burn.
Right? Like
I
that's a
want
fucking-
it. I want it.
That's
But,
an
like-
awful libertarian statement on your part, Will.
Well, I mean, I like to pick and choose.
But it's technically possible, right? Do you think?
uh
If they have the social security numbers, the addresses, and names, like that's all you need.
yeah, I mean, I think what it comes down to is there's not a lot of economic incentive for somebody to do that. It's a lot of
Yeah, you have to-
letters to send.
You have to have a Tyler Durden who's like let's burn the
right.
road.
Yeah, man. I'm into that.
I don't hate it, but
I'm not willing to be Tyler Durden. I'm willing to be
a passive observer.
what's his name?
Yeah.
He was the Hulk. He's all-
Edward
Norton.
Norton.
Edward. I'm
Edward
willing to be
Norton.
an Edward Norton.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to be a Brad Pitt.
Okay,
here.
so you want to be taken along for the ride, but you don't want to necessarily be like directing the criminal activity.
Oh yeah, I'm a wuss. Are you kidding me? I mean, actually, to be fair, I came on here with my real name, so I feel like I'm pretty badass right
That's true.
now.
That's
but
true.
Yeah, so did I.
Um,
Marty Bent's my real name.
oh man, yeah, you're gonna be filing your tax return as Marty Bent 1,000 times.
I've actually signed a couple contracts as Marty Bent. That's been weird.
As you should.
Plausible deniability. Wow, This is getting cut out.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Where were we with IRS?
So
Your information be all right. Yeah, so people were willing to put out. I mean, it happened a couple times. You threw 100 ETH into an ICO. It turned into 200 ETH when that thing came up. People were doing that over and over and over and over again, and they were sending it. Most ICOs are smart contracts. They're not some guy who writes down everybody who sent in and writes down, what they get sent later. There's some amount of automation in there, or multi-sig wallets, because you start with your first and then you forget, oh, hey, this isn't just a private key. This is code running on the mainnet. And you put money in there. Like, people got lazy, and again, I'm gonna call to your libertarian responses. Like, people, you can't get lazy in a system where someone doesn't cover your ass for you.
No, I completely agree with that. But there are certain cultural elements that encourage, well, everybody's using this parity contract, so I can use this parity contract without auditing the code, and that plays into things.
And I'm not asking them to audit their code, like every individual, because that's absurd, and that's also kind of my anti-elitism angle. You should be able to interact with this stuff, but not know how to read smart contract code. That should be a given. But
who's making the argument to the contrary? I think a lot of the Bitcoin community, advocates running binaries that you've verified, just as the Ethereum people would.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we as a society need to start adopting like efficient ways in which to trust things. And I think
is that possible? I mean, there's so many variables.
Well,
that
we
go
already
into
we already
trust.
do that today, right? Like credit score. Let's talk about credit score.
I don't
that's
fucking trust a credit score as far as I can throw it. It's virtual. I can't throw it anywhere.
Okay. Well, luckily, I'm not trying to take out a loan with the
Bank of Marty.
Bank of Bent. Got to go for that alliteration. I'm not saying we need a credit score. I'm just saying that they're like, after a time of people getting burned, we develop systems by which to trust things, and no one has that metric. I mean, one of the things that really drives me up the wall, I hate, is all these ICO rating websites. Have you landed on any of these?
Oh my god, there's like an ICO influencer fucking website. It's
these things are garbage.
Bitcoin C-.
Well, I'm not talking about.
Are you talking about like token curated registries and shit like that, or?
I'm not talking about who's the organization that gave Bitcoin a C- as an investment?
Weiss.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the traditional
Weissman.
ones, which, whatever. If a C- drives you away from Bitcoin, you probably shouldn't have invested in the first place. So great. I'm talking about these spun up websites that use fucking WordPress templates that rate ICOs, and they just pump the ones they want you to. Like, that time shall pass. We shall get our Snopes, our actual trustworthy sources out there. But it takes time to cultivate those things. The early internet was full of scams, full of garbage, and we're gonna get there. And I think smart contracts are gonna get there too. We're probably gonna find ways in which people can trust them. I mean, ERCs, for what it's worth, just to clarify, ERC, all it means is Ethereum request for comment.
It's basically like a BIP, right?
It's even less than a BIP. It's just like, yo, what do you guys think about this thing? It doesn't have to be smart
Does it
contract.
have to be a contract?
No.
Or it's just anything?
Pretty much anything. So saying ERCs are the way of the future is kind of but there will be a gold stamp of approval from various people about this smart contract is pretty legit. The problem, I think, with the parity one, as far as I know, it was merged without acceptance from anybody.
I think Gavwood took some what would you call them? He took liberties, exactly.
Right.
Liberties.
And I think Gavin's a smart guy. He's done a lot of good stuff, but I think that on both ends, he did not follow the kind of standards that I would hope that somebody would who has that level of influence. But likewise, nobody called him out or if they did call him out, it wasn't listened to. But I think we're going to hold a higher standard for ourselves and where we put our money, as you would today. You would not go to a guy in an alley and be like, "Yo, here's $10,000, make it happen." We're gonna get there, and it takes time, and it sucks that people got burned.
You should have had a camera on me in Nashville last week. I'm kidding.
Scary thought.
Oh man, I don't want to see what was under that trench coat, but I think it sucks that people got burned, but I think to point to the central authority and say this is your fault for letting this happen is almost like extremely anti-libertarian. To say that there should have been a guiding hand that coddled you from the possibilities of getting burned.
You're completely right, and I'm certainly not saying that like the SEC should step in and squash anything, because I don't think that's a long-term fix for anything. I think you're totally right that these markets are extremely young, and that we have to adopt wisdom kind of as participants, and that only accumulates over time. But again, there are these cultural elements.
It's that first principle, like the first principles in my mind, like of security first and securing the protocol level, like.
And that's great that we have something to fall back on for that. But what do you say to people that $3 as a transaction fee is their take home for a week? If you're trying to get that kind of adoption.
First of all, right now you can get a transaction confirmed within a day for 5 satoshis on the byte. So, like, that's
what's that translate to an average transaction?
To an average transaction.
Sorry, man, I'm stuck in fiat.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell you, but
I can tell you that because I checked before here because I knew it was going to come up, that the average transaction cost average right now. So obviously, some people are probably setting ridiculous highs to get it done quick.
Mean is problematic. You have to look at percentiles. So and fee estimation is its own art that Alex Morcos knows a ton about because he's worked on that stuff. But it like. You have to incorporate as a parameter your willingness to wait for your transaction to confirm. So I mean, it depends.
Okay, fine. All right, let's move the goalposts on what I said. What are you going to say to the guy who needs a cheap transaction now? Are you going to say, we're going to figure it out with Lightning in some amount of time, and you'll have to pay this amount?
Use Venmo, and if you can't use Venmo, then realize that what you're doing comes at a premium. Because what you're doing is skirting censorship. If you can't use Venmo for what you're doing, it might be a transaction that the government wants to avoid, or it might be something cross borders, or it might be something high value. And you should acknowledge that the transaction that you're doing has to live on a probably monotonically growing network of computers for perpetuity. And that costs money, and that should have a premium.
Right, and I agree with that. I agree that is what Bitcoin stands for. But I think that there's a use case out there. Venmo, obviously, they need to connect to your bank. What if you don't have a bank that supports them? What if you live in a country that doesn't have, whatever? All I'm saying is that use case exists, and to try to stand... I mean, I guess really I feel bad because I'm arguing against you guys, but I'm not arguing against you guys because you just agreed. You're like, yeah, other blockchains, that's fine.
No, but to Marty's point, we don't have to focus on being friendly. We have to focus on getting the stuff right.
Yeah, we're steel manning it.
Yeah, that's this is the important part. But look, okay, so the closest analogy I can think of to the Bitcoin blockchain and all subsequent efforts that follow in its spirit is BitTorrent. And with BitTorrent, basically you have a file of fixed size, say a movie or a piece of music or a piece of text, that you're distributing across the network and then downloading from, right? So you have growth in one dimension. For a torrent to remain healthy, it has to be hosted among a number of peers, right? A blockchain, on the other hand, grows itself indefinitely. The data keeps growing. And then presumably, as the network sees more use, in order to participate with full security, you have nodes being added to the network and coming online. So you now have 2 dimensions of growth. You have both the data growing and the nodes growing. This is like unlike any other system that we've ever seen. And so as a result, like you can't have these, even 10,000 character line programs that are executed and living on the blockchain that get carried out on every single node, because it's just not scalable.
Yeah, you're totally right. Bitcoin has locked its two dimensions in that it's going to optimize for, which is number of nodes and size of transactions, or whatever you want to measure it as.
But realize that number of nodes is an
The
incredibly
most important part.
It is. It is.
Oh, I
because-
agree.
It's the most important part.
And as I noted before, Ethereum right now does have the most number of nodes, or at least over Bitcoin. I don't know if there's some crazy currency out
with
there
a different security model.
Exactly.
with a right. And so that's all I'm saying, is that there are multiple levers to pull here, and to say that your thing is superior because you chose the right levers is disingenuous to people who have different use cases and have different needs out of your thing. I will always agree with you that Bitcoin right now, for quasi-anonymous transactions, is the most secure thing. But it doesn't fulfill certain use cases depending on what you're optimizing for, and that's always it.
Well,
What
I
are
would
you
I would
optimizing?
push back and say that the use cases that you want right now take time. You can't get these use cases out of the box. Like, any money that has ever become money has had to go through this continuum. And so collectible, store value, medium of exchange, unit of account, it's just going to take time to get to the use cases that you're envisioning. And it's going to, I agree, or I would argue that we're going to be able to do everything that Ethereum can do on second and third layers. It's just going to take time. And that's what perturbs me in particular, is that, like, I see a lot of impatience in the space. It's like, we want this now. It's like, this shit takes time. And I would argue that going sort of slow and steady is more advantageous than going move fast and break things in the long run. And so we're going to hit like a time scale in the long run where the move fast and break things sort of mentality of Ethereum sort of trips it up, and the move slow and steady mentality of Bitcoin sort of proves its worth at some point in the next 10 to 20 years.
All right, Aesop, I dig that. I'm with you. I'm just saying that.
Big fan of A$AP Rock as well.
Yeah.
Underrated.
Very, very underrated.
All I am saying is that it's very convenient for us who are speculating in our lofty castle to say, like, yes, this is fine to have years from now, but for whatever reason, whether you call it impatience or you call it need, we've kind of opened Pandora's box on this possibility, and to say, hold up, I know you got your use case, but like, it's going to take some time, is a little presumptive.
So one interesting point that the director of the MIT Media Lab made at Scaling Bitcoin in 2017 was that this guy, his name is Joey, was working on the development of the internet. And he was saying basically that back when the internet was being actively engineered and worked on in its formative years, like, very few people were using it. And they had a lot of room to screw up and experiment. And Bitcoin has gone from 0 to 60 in 10 years, and that's not a lot of time. So I don't know. I think we are in kind of different circumstances, but I think we're doing pretty well, honestly. I'll be happy if Bitcoin retains its current characteristics, like, because right now I can get on a plane to Hong Kong and move a lot of money that way, and sort of not worry about being censored or not worrying about having my bank account frozen. And as long as we keep that going, I think it'll be a successful project.
Yeah, I think the value of Bitcoin lies in what it has right now. And in a lot of ways, I think that is true of both Ethereum and many other currencies. The value that it has right now, there is value. A lot of people say, like, I actually, maybe if pushed to it, I might say Ethereum is overvalued on its potential future value because of how much people are building on top of it right now. You have a lot of companies pledging themselves to be, in the I can't remember the name, like the Ethereum Corporate Alliance or something like that.
Oh, what is that?
Enterprise EEA, Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. You have a lot of companies pledging themselves to that, and that those announcements never shift the value, but I think they change the way people look at it and say, oh, you know what, in 3 years, 5 years, this is going to be the hot shit. And so maybe it's overvalued in that regard, but it does provide a value today in the same way that you said that Bitcoin provides value today, that is unique to it. And that I think, you can't undersell. You can say that maybe it hasn't been done the way you would do it or the way a handful of people would do it, but it's done enough the way that a lot of people are willing to stake what I would argue is almost more valuable than time or than money, but is their time on it. You see an outrageously large number of products coming that are built on top of this, and companies that are willing to kind of stake their name, not wholeheartedly. You don't see Citibank saying like, all right, we're moving the whole ledger over to Ethereum. But they're willing to invest the resources and say publicly, hey, we think this might be worth a fair shake.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that, like, wholeheartedly. And it's like, I always fall back on that, like, this is money, and we should be as conservative with it as possible.
To your point, though, I mean, sometimes I wonder about, decentralization is not the end. It's sort of a means.
Yeah.
And I think that people that treat it as an end are kind of misguided. People who want everything massively decentralized and distributed, like, to the nth degree. Like, I don't care if pictures of my dog are decentralized, because I don't really, that's not controversial. I guess there's an argument to be made that you shouldn't use privacy-preserving technology only when it's meaningful, because you need sort of an anonymity set there. But I think there's a priority list, right?
I agree. There's a priority list, but what makes you think that your priorities are more important than someone else's?
Because the priority we're talking about is money, which is like a civilization-wide priority.
Well, let's be clear here. Your priority isn't money. It's some facet of money, because money has many qualities. Money has liquidity as a quality. It has, backing value as a quality. What backs this money?
Well, you're falling back onto my point that this shit's going to take time. Like, it's going to take time to evolve into that holistic view of money that defines money, which is it has to be a store value, a medium of exchange, something that's liquid, that's exchangeable. Like, my whole point
why does it follow that order? Like, where is that order derived from?
From history. I mean, like, it's a combination of mechanics and psychology. Like, psychology is, I would say, 75% of it. Like, getting everybody to agree that a certain money is a money takes time. Like,
how do you measure that agreement?
That's a great question.
I would argue, in a certain way that CoinMarketCap.com might be that measure.
Oh, fuck.
I know.
Fuck
I know.
no.
Hold on. I'm playing devil's advocate here. This is my
go to like on-chain FX or like Coinmetrics. Don't use CoinMarketCap.
All right, fine. All I mean to say is that you're talking about metrics that don't have defined measurements. So you're saying something needs to be accepted first as a store of value. How do you measure whether people are using it as a store of value or using it as, utility or something like that?
If we want to look at metrics, I guess you could look at coin days destroyed. Would that be a good metric of store of value? Like,
sorry,
people that
coin days destroyed?
Like,
basically the number of time that you've let your coins sit.
Yeah.
Why is that destroyed?
Oh, it's like, I guess it's opportunity cost, right? Like, you could have this many USD if you had sold.
But it's a deflationary asset. I mean, you could argue that the value is going up by letting it sit.
Oh yeah, certainly a lot of people would. But the fact that it's deflationary is inherent in the supposition that this thing is going to have value in the future. So basically that's kind of the most honest metric, I guess, is like, how long have you held on to this? Because presumably, if you've held on to it for a long time, you think that in the future it's going to have a lot of value. And
So you think a
you're not
market
parting
with
with it.
zero liquidity is a good metric?
I want to say zero liquidity. I would
Right.
say-
So it's a combination.
Yeah, and again, it's psychological, and like, how do you measure psychology? It's impossible. Like, it's just
They're heuristics.
So let's shift gears here to another technical matter that's a recent personal favorite of mine.
is it cosmic or terrestrial?
It's fairly terrestrial. This is ET phoning home right here. So there is a distinction which listeners of the pod may or may not know about. In Ethereum, you have an account-based model. In Bitcoin, you have a UTXO-based model. The UTXO-based model is a little bit harder to reason about because basically the idea is that when you spend a coin, you have an output, and for that output, there are certain inputs for which the sum total of the inputs have to outweigh or equal the output. Usually outweigh because you want to pay the miners a fee. In Ethereum, on the other hand, which is account-based, basically you have a sort of what we call stateful transaction, which is moving a value into this account. And so the two, it's sort of a subtle nuance, but the two are different. And the reason I bring this up is because a seemingly unrelated design choice has very concrete implications for attack. So in Ethereum, you can wage this attack where basically you Sybil someone, which is to say that you surround them with nodes that are dishonest and feeding them bad information. And you say, okay, I've paid you 10 ETH, right? So maybe you had some out-of-band agreement that I would pay you 10 ETH, give you this thing, and then you would give me back, say, 5 ETH, right? So they broadcast then the transaction that's paying you 5 ETH. Well, because this was a Sybil attack, you basically unengage and reveal to them that they have been off-chain the whole time. But you replay their 5 ETH payment to you, and you get 5 ETH. That works in Ethereum. This doesn't work in Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I agree with that possibility.
And hang on, let me
is
just...
that printing ETH, basically?
No.
It's not printing ETH. It's just basically... It's replaying a transaction that transfers value from one holder to another.
Marty, have you ever seen The Sting? Robert Redford and what's the other guy?
Paul Newman?
Paul Newman. Yeah, great movie. Strong recommend. If you don't have a movie list yet for the new website, throw The Sting on there.
I'm gonna watch it tonight.
This is like playing somebody a different horse race and getting them to bet on the real horse race and then making them lose money that way. Sorry, spoiler alert, The Sting.
Yeah. Well, hopefully everybody who hasn't seen that will forget by the time they watch it.
Right. It's a very small detail.
But let me just spell out for the listeners that the reason that this isn't possible in Bitcoin is because it uses this kind of, at first blush, more unfriendly mechanism of transacting, which is the UTXO mechanism. And basically, if you tried to do that in Bitcoin, you wouldn't be able to replay that transaction that grants the thief 5 Bitcoin because it's based on a UTXO that doesn't exist in the main chain. And so, again, this is an example in my mind of a concept that seems more straightforward in Ethereum, this account-based model, that actually results in a wider attack vector than Bitcoin has.
I would also like to point out, though, that in your proposed attack on this person, you agreed to an off-chain exchange. You said that they sent you 10 ETH for something off-chain. And
well, no, I mean this could be totally on-chain. Somebody could say to you, "Hey, I need to get rid of this ETH. I'll send it to you for 10. You wait 5 days and send me back 5."
Right, and that could be orchestrated as a smart contract, which would not play well with a Sybil attack, because if I sent a transaction to a smart contract, it wouldn't exist on the mainnet, and it would not go through.
Yes, it could be architected in a smart contract, but could also not be. Like,
Right, but that was an agreement that you made off chain, and so there, again, it's that discussion of deferring trust.
Yeah, and that gets back to like the discussion of the attack surface. Like you're just increasing the attack surface in at that point.
I think that's what it is. Like I think, Will, you're right that maybe such an attack might be not as plausible as something else, but the fact that it's available to an attacker, to me, is very meaningful. And like if let's say that Chase Bank starts using Ethereum and they hire some hapless dude who claims to know Solidity to architect their Ethereum system, and then all of a sudden they rely on a pattern like this, and nobody has really thought about it. It's again a reuse of the parity multisig wallet over and over. It's just like there's this pattern that's available to somebody who's dishonest, and then it gets misused.
Yeah, and that's how you build your Chesterton's fence. You do these things, you make a mistake, and you patch it.
Can you
and
define Chesterton's fence for us?
Chesterton's fence is the idea. All right, so you're walking around, you feel in your field or someone else's field, and you see a fence. What do you do with it? Do you destroy it, or do you think to yourself, somebody probably built this fence for a good reason, I'm just gonna like let it hang here, or hop over it, I guess, is another
Option.
analog for that. But the idea is that there are things that people don't have to know every single detail about. You don't have to know necessarily why you look both ways before you cross the street. As long as you know it, you'll be fine. And I think those things are built up over time. As somebody mentioned earlier, we have the ability to, transmit information across time and across people, and we can share experiences, that kind of stuff. That's going to build here in this ecosystem. And that's why earlier when you asked, is this going to happen in our lifetime? I said no, because we're pretty ironed in our ways of like, oh, this website says that if I send my money here, it's going to get there. Like, that's fine. I think people are going to learn, is there a smart contract? Has this agency validated it as, a legitimate contract? There's going to be a shorthand for that. It's going to be so fast.
I don't know if I agree. Like, I think Marty remarked earlier at some point, I don't know if this was on Twitter or in an interview, but he basically said, like, people know enough to not build secure applications in PHP. And this, like, I think what you're arguing for is like building a secure application in PHP, because you're like, well, look, yeah, it's PHP, there are these attack vectors, but like over time we'll accumulate enough wisdom to avoid these attack vectors. And it's like, you could just avoid all that by doing a much simpler thing.
Yeah, and that argument came from like a CMS background, where like most CMSs are built back end on PHP, where if it's like a blog or something that's putting out like written content, it's not as big a deal as value transfer, and you have to de-alienate between these different use cases. And for me, it's a non-starter with money. It's got to be as secure as possible.
Well, I mean, I think that's why I'm kind of anti-maximalist, is there are these use cases that require different levers to be pulled, and I'm sure there's somebody out there who says, nope, I want this in gold. Could be fake money, could be money where the serial numbers are tracked by the government and going to be, I'm going to be arrested for this, or whatever. Like, there are different mediums of exchange right now that exist for different reasons, and maybe Bitcoin cements itself as, hey, if you want to make 100% sure that this one transaction lives alone and it's done, maybe that's the avenue for Bitcoin.
I would argue that we're in a time where the multiple medium of exchanges is a luxury, and what we're falling back on is when those luxuries aren't afforded to us, what is the most sound medium of exchange and most sound money? And I would argue that's Bitcoin.
But even, I mean,
Is that,
look,
would you, like,
Yeah, I mean,
we're afforded the luxury of medium of exchange now because fiat currencies are hot and they're readily available, but the fat lady's only going to sing, or excuse me, the music's only going to be playing for so long.
No, oh, right.
is Fat Lady not in vogue?
I guess phrase alternatively, the fat lady is going to sing at some point.
Exactly.
And the music's going to stop.
Exactly.
which is I think
That's
I'm mixing
kind of-
analogies
yeah,
here.
That's
No,
a little
but
dubious.
You're right. The fat lady's going to sing at some point, and when that happens, like, what are you going to fall back
No,
on?
I think this is something that I think a lot about, and not a lot of people talk about, because again, it involves a lot of kind of forecasting. But if you look at the balance sheet of the United States government, I mean, this money doesn't seem like it's going to last for very long if you sit down and look at the numbers. So I do think, like, right now we're afforded a kind of luxury that we can transact in these different mediums. But if you're asking me which system I would put my faith in long term, it's absolutely Bitcoin, because I have the source code on my computer and I know how it works and I know what the monetary policy is, and no other single human being can influence that. So that, I mean, personally, that makes me sleep a lot better at night, and that's why I hold Bitcoin.
I mean, it's still, look, if you really want to get down to what's the infallible currency, hold a physical thing in your hands, and then that's not even infallible, because what if we're all living in a simulation, you know? And you simulate me giving me the thing that I traded my gold
But
for.
I would
like,
argue that Bitcoin's more infallible than gold. I'm gonna get yelled at for this, but
No, you're not. I mean, like,
in the
look,
sense that, like, I can fucking hold it in my brain and nobody can, like, literally grab it. Like, nobody can take my ring. Like, you could take my ring off my hand right now and run away with the gold. Like, you can't take my thoughts from my brain.
some, certain people time lock Bitcoin so that basically it can't be taken from them, and that's a wonderful property that you can say. And by the way, a lot of people don't know that there are native operations to Bitcoin that aren't exploited in the same way that they are Ethereum, like multi-sig contracts, like time lock contracts, like check sequence verify. But
let's be clear, those aren't abused in Ethereum. Those are abused in particular smart contracts that do not implement them correctly.
okay.
I would argue that the possibility that they can be implemented incorrectly is a bad non-starter.
I agree. But anyway, like that's a pretty cool feature of your money. And so I put more faith in Bitcoin as a monetary system than almost anything else. And that stands alone from adoption. I think basically people are catching up to Bitcoin, kind of as Marty says, like, Bitcoin's going to change people faster than people change Bitcoin. And I do think that's true. I mean, I think that some people were primed for Bitcoin because they were thinking about this kind of weird, I don't know, people have been noodling on monetary policy for a while, and people were ready for it. But
Hike was ready for it in the fucking 80s. He fucking predicted it.
So if you don't mind me proposing a slight topic
I
change.
mind.
Yikes. Yo, don't come on the podcast. Marty's a Nazi. Who do you think the next generation of cryptocurrency maintainers are going to be? Who do you think is going to get interested in this stuff? Because one of the things that I hear a lot of people talk about is like the Ethereum crew, very young,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of inexperience, if you that's air quotes on that.
That's direct quotes to me.
A lot of brashness, whereas the Bitcoin is like a bunch of old cypherpunks who are like cool and
disagree. Let me tell you why.
Well, for one, you.
Well, yeah, I'm somewhere between. I'm 28 years old.
Yeah, but you said it yourself. You were doing PRs when you were 25.
I guess so. With reduced frequency.
All right, feel free to dispute the cypher.
So shout out Andrew Chow. A Chow is one of the most prolific Bitcoin Core contributors, and this kid is still in school. Sorry for doxing A Chow. But Andrew's
Grade school? Like what?
No. He's an undergraduate in America somewhere.
More
Won't
doxing.
say more than that.
He goes to North Dakota State University.
You can really find out about A
How
Chow
bad would you feel if you were right about that?
That was terrible. Terrible.
I sure hope I'm giving A Chow an ego boost that's commensurate with the amount of information I'm revealing about him. But I don't even think this guy can drink. And he is an incredible contributor to Bitcoin Core.
All right,
That's all I'll say.
I wasn't going. I mean, I was not going for exceptions to the rule. I think it's fair to say that the Bitcoin crowd skews.
I think
Developer crowd skews older.
I think the blue Matt might be like your guys' age. I don't know. Nobody knows. He's ageless.
He's younger than me. I know for a fact.
Okay.
But
he's
what I will say, what I think is more important is that like we don't need our schooling system needs to get better. Like we need to.
Oh, it's busted. And I
It's
mean,
busted, but like we need to like realize like, oh my god, like instead of like I took 5 years of Latin. Like I fucking I should have been learning like JavaScript or like CSS, HTML.
Are you a Catholic school upbringing?
Yeah, I went to a Jesuit
All
high
right.
school. Like I fucking took 5 years. I took 5 years of dead language.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Pater noster.
Hail Mary, full of grace.
I can do it in Latin for you right now.
Oh man! All right, one up.
There was
one
a
up.
time. There was a time.
Yeah.
Pater noster. Nostri Dominici.
Domini's, yeah.
Yeah, I could do it. I could do it right now. Like, but I should have been learning fucking like C++ or.
4I = 0.
Yeah. But that's something like we have to adjust to. Like, that's what I'm like. To your point, Will. Like, we're not going to see the benefits of this for generations, and I think that's because we are terribly equipped to learn at the pace that we should be learning as a society.
Yeah. So, all right, circle
And
way
this
back.
is why I want to go back to you. Like, you dropped out of high school noticing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
Okay,
tell your
all
damn biography, Will.
all right,
Just
all right.
Just
Yeah.
give the people what they want.
I hardcore deflected up front because honestly, I'm a huge poser, and I'm always worried
That's
about getting
completely
credential
not
checked
true.
at parties. So, yeah. So I dropped out of high school. As James mentioned earlier, it was for my wanting to develop video games like every other 16-year-old out there. I think I disillusioned myself fast enough to not get into $120,000 of debt at some state
and
school.
it was your absolute willingness to defy truant officers and like hide in your closet. Like that was a pretty
Boss.
key part of it.
Boss, you were hiding from officers? Is this true?
Oh yeah, Tijuana Brown.
Tijuana Brown.
Shout outs to Tijuana Brown.
Shout out Tijuana Brown.
She threw me in the back of a police car. I thought I was pretty cool at the time.
I didn't know there was a police car.
Yeah. Cuffs and all.
Holy
Oh, wow.
No, I mean, I guess in Northern Virginia they take truancy seriously. I'm sure in like downtown Baltimore they don't give a fuck. Shout outs to The Wire
Shout out
season
Wire.
4.
One of my fondest memories is watching The Wire with Will, by the way.
Oh yeah, Wire and Wings night. That was a strong 2-person family tradition for a solid year in Midtown East.
That sounds like an incredible night.
Incredible multiple nights.
Nights.
So, let's get back to you dropping out of high. Like, I think
Right.
we need more yous. That's what I'm trying to get to.
All right,
is
all
we
right.
need more people like you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in a lot of ways I disagree with that because for one, I'm working with a lot of very smart people who went to school and who know things that I don't. I'm not saying that I could not learn those things, but there is something to be said for being classically educated in computer science. I think you take certain things into consideration. For instance, my brother is one of those. I think if I interviewed at Chain Code Labs, they would laugh me out of there because I just don't have a basis for a certain classification of computing problems. But I do think that the path that I took well equipped me to build a certain type of thing that, if you ask me, I think Bitcoin is lacking a little bit, which is sort of the bridge between reality and cryptocurrency, which is it's not this thing that sits in space and you can hold in your brain and no matter what anyone does to you, can't take it away. It's this thing that actually provides utility and ease of use and you can think about in realistic terms. And I think that's something I see a lot of in the Ethereum community, and I think is promoted by the ease of access that I, previously mentioned, is a way to build things people can use today, probably tomorrow. Maybe they build some piece of garbage that gets hacked. I don't know. But the point is people have room to experiment in a pretty friendly way. I have no idea, how I would get started on like some layer 2 Bitcoin stuff.
How did you learn to program?
So how did I learn to program?
Swearing.
Oh yeah,
What was the first thing you programmed?
Very first program.
man. I think my dad asked me to program the Fibonacci sequence without hard coding it. I think that.
Yeah. That was.
Remember, I used Python, but I.
Holy shit. My dad never asked anything from me.
Shout out, Dad. He has doing discrete math problems in Pizza Hut. when
Oh
we were,
yeah,
like,
I mean
6
that's where the like strong libertarian core economic background comes from. James picked up more of the math than I will ever pretend to know, but
Wait, so how do you write a Fibonacci
you got a for loop
sequence?
that adds an item from the array that you're iterating on. It takes the last item
So it's like an
and it just
end.
adds to it.
Yeah, the classic pitfall is to do a tree recursion, which blows up exponentially in terms of runtime, but you can do it iteratively more easily.
One of the few times where the naive solution wins out.
Exactly.
Damn. Gentlemen, we've been in here for fucking 3 hours already.
Really?
Yeah, it's
All
9
right.
o'clock.
Time to free Marty up to go home to his wife.
Do I want to do that?
All right.
Just kidding, Rachel. I love you.
What's the note to end on?
I don't know. Do we? I mean, we got 10 minutes to end. What did we solve tonight? Did we solve anything? I don't think so.
Here's what I think
I
we
think
solved.
I think we hashed a lot of things out, though.
I think one thing that we solved is that you,
Pun intended.
the listeners, know that Marty has a heart of gold. Despite all his pessimism, I was able to just polish a nugget of positivity for a hot second, which was instantly taken away, but I know it's there.
I would agree.
I see Marty's heart of gold every morning when I get his email, so there's no doubt in my mind.
I don't know why you're reading or listening to me. I don't know. I don't know. I just happened to be here. I don't know how I ended up at Barstool Sports. I don't know what the fuck is going on right now, but I know that I'm here, and I know that I very much enjoyed the last 3 hours. I think I'm smarter. I think I'm a little smarter because of it. I don't know if you two are. I mean, you two might be dumber from talking to me, but
No, I think any opportunity in which I have to remain civil with my brother is an opportunity to learn, because he's a very smart guy who calls me on my shit, and he has done so a couple of times here, and I feel like I'm a more well-rounded person as a part of it.
I do as well. No, I really enjoyed this conversation. Like, I think we learned a lot. Like, and I think the main thing that we learned is that we have no fucking idea what we're doing.
We have no fucking idea what we're doing at a macroeconomic
Exactly,
level. I think
exactly.
each of us carries out the contribution to the ecosystem. Marty, I feel like especially those first 2 episodes you did are a great entry point for people into understanding both the community and the history behind this stuff. I think James barely needs to speak for himself in terms of contribution. I mean, the man's landed many a pull request that I'm sure will pay dividends 10, 20 years from now.
Minor at best.
And I make it easier to buy ICOs. I'm sorry.
I don't know how I feel about that, but
Hey, man, if I didn't do it, somebody would.
yeah, somebody would. You had to bring up ICOs right at the end.
We touched on it.
We did.
I told you your investing advice. Look for why they made a token. They probably don't have a reason.
No.
What I would say is it's a real privilege to be close with someone who has a different perspective than you do, and to be able to not only get that perspective, but have a basis of respect for them, which I obviously do for my very very intelligent brother, and just to be able to test your own ideas. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I would say try to surround yourself with people who, while they may not hold the same viewpoint as you,
100%.
But you have to
you respect.
Yeah, there have to be certain principles that you share and that you can kind of establish a bedrock from, because I don't think there's value in just going out and seeking dissonance for the sake of dissonance.
Oh, you shouldn't feed the trolls, nor should you be fed by the trolls. You need to seek out, true wisdom from respectable people, and I think that's really hard to find. Honestly, if I could introduce a product into the world, it would be you enter your viewpoint, and I return to you people who hold an opposing viewpoint who are respectable.
Yeah.
I wish that existed.
I hope you guys thought this was respectable tonight. That's the only hope I have tonight. Like, I had a fucking blast with you two. Like, it has enlightened me. It is, and I will be the first to admit, like, I am very very quick to be negative, you know.
Well, you're willing to spend 3 hours to suss out the validity of that negativity, so I'd say, Marty, you've got a lot on a lot of people.
And a quick plug for Chain Code. I just want to say that the residency was an incredible opportunity, and if and when we do it again, I encourage anybody to apply and just come and spend a few weeks at Chain Code, because the people there are truly exceptional, and the people who have a hand in running the program, namely John and Alex and Suhas and Marco and Russ and Matt, are extraordinary, and they're just wonderful people. So if the opportunity arises, please apply and come hang out at Chain Code.
Shit, are we doing plugs now?
Plug.
Oh, yes. All right. Plug to my crypto. Solid team. You've heard me shill Ethereum all night, but, honestly, as I tried to mention before, and I'll try to mention now, I'm just pro blockchain development everywhere. So are my fellow devs on it. If you're interested in getting your feet wet, whether or not you want to stick for the long term or you just want to, soak up the ecosystem, learn, certain things, we're totally open source. I get contributors every day, shoot me messages and stuff. So if you're interested in working on that kind of stuff, jump in. We're also focused on a little bit more than just Ethereum. Gonna just hint that way. No major statements, but yeah. If you're listening, you're like, hell yeah, these guys are cool, and I want to work on blockchain stuff too. Definitely a good starting point.
My name is Marty Bent. I'm your token idiot, and we are gonna wrap the podcast there. Peace and love, everybody.
We love you, Marty.
Marty!
That was fun.
Oh,
man,
yeah.
3 hours.
Woo. Jesus.
We're gonna have to cut that into 2.
I gotta say, I'm sad that I didn't make it to the end, but
We'll
I got
see
close.
how much you edit out, and then we'll see if we've got 45 minutes.
I don't edit a lot out.
We took multiple pee breaks.
I mean, we each took one.
We each took one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In aggregate, it was multiple.
That was well coordinated, by the way.
Yeah.
Not at all. I literally said, I gotta pee.
I didn't hear it.
We gotta get one last penis in there.
Penis.
That was fun.
That was cool.
It really opened my eyes. So,
No, there are a lot of really good arguments for, why Ethereum should be a thing, why it should be worked on.
Well, you were exceptionally open-minded guests for this. I mean,
to the Will show.
to the Will
Ethereum show.
Yeah, I mean, you said you're having an Ethereum core guy on later at some point, right?
Lane Reddick.
Yeah.
Who?
I don't know Lane's contributions, but I swear to God,
he showed up last year, this time last year.
whatever he can speak to is going to be way more than me. So I appreciate
I find that hard to believe.
that you're seeking that out. I feel bad for your listeners that I'm their first exposure to the enemy.
I don't.
I feel like you're a great first.
A good representative.
Thank you.
Realistic, and idealistic at the same time.
But you guys did a great job of not teaming up on me and whooping my ass.
I literally had try your hardest not to shit on Ethereum.
That's like the do not congratulate for
Start.
Marty.
Start.
Oh, Jesus.
No,
God.
that's one thing I'll admit. I'm dumb. I don't know the
Marty,
technical aspects of it.
You gotta stop saying that, man, because you're gonna lose credibility with people. You understand so much more than.
It's
These guys.
disgusting that you can school me on eclipse attacks when this is like, I don't know what that is. Please pull up an article and tell me what it
Not only
is.
that, but you have experience trading in real markets that are not cryptocurrency. I mean, that alone puts you head and shoulders above people like us for long run.
When you
market
meet
value.
traders are fucking mouth readers. Just react to instincts. What I think is smart is and this is coming from now, probably 4 years ago, I started working with heavily into code. Like I was writing code in MATLAB, but like the CIO that I worked, like the chief investment officer who wrote the coding base that I manipulated to pull the data from Bloomberg, like he was like literally in line to be a Russian cosmonaut that immigrated to the U.S. to get away from the Soviet Union.
Yeah, thank God for
Like,
him.
I hold Dmitry up to like this pedestal of like,
Oh yeah.
he's smartest. Like he wrote the algorithm for the HFRI hedge fund. Like I would never be able to do that. Like the fact that like you can write lines of code and manipulate data and make things happen. Like I cannot do that, and I feel powerless compared to that.
But you can. I mean, you just admitted to having manipulated MATLAB, and you've done the PHP job.
I can't build that code base from scratch. Yeah, like
Nobody
given
builds it.
enough
Nobody
time.
builds it from scratch the first time. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
that's
The only way that I made it work was I worked at an agency where other people did that part for me, and then I got to watch and learn.
Yeah.
It's the only way it worked.
If you really wanted to, you could put yourself in that environment where you're like, okay, I learned how to do this.
I probably should.
And I mean, you know what? You have the number.
I don't think you should, because there are plenty of dudes in our seat. There are not a lot of dudes in your seat who are actually, as Will says, serving as an adapter between like the technical community and the people who use it.
So that's what I'm trying to do. Like when you were saying tonight, like that's what I'm trying to do with the newsletters. Be like the olive branch
Right.
between the uber technical side and the masses that want to know more.
Yeah, that's what people are fucking up on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the number of projects that I look at that just have no respect for, like
that's why I write in Barstool's voice and like curse in the newsletter. Like, I can write proper for you if you want me to. Like, people are going to listen to that.
No, and people love it. Like that's why I love referring you to my friends, because I'm like, oh, like there's this dude from Philly. You're from Philly. You're gonna understand this communication. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
you speak your language.
Yo, this shit's fucking crazy.
or like, yeah, I mean, that's why I love this show, is because you get into these like stupid digressions, and like it's not all just like crypto jibber jabber.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, James has another guy that I don't know if you still listen to him, but the Bitcoin Markets Update guy.
oh,
Ansel?
Ansel,